He stirred the pot carefully. But murder has a way of boiling over. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Let's keep this detective club thriving. Comment where you're tuning in from. I truly enjoy hearing from each of you. Let's get into it. Ugh, a matter of taste. I was on my second cup of coffee and my fourth attempt to crack the crossword when the doorbell rang. Not the usual buzz from someone too timid to press twice, but a long, confident ring. Like they were announcing themselves to a dinner party. Wolfe naturally didn't flinch. It was just past 11 and his orchid time was sacred. He sat at his desk upstairs, probably lecturing Theodore on humidity ratios and the moral failings of commercial potting soil. I was the one who had to rise from the red leather chair in the front room and greet whoever had decided Monday morning was the right time to disturb the sanctity of our West 35th Street brownstone. The woman standing on the stoop had the kind of poise that made you wonder if she was about to hand you a lawsuit or ask for your seat on a board of directors. Late 30s, beige trench coat, no makeup but perfect hair, sharp, neat, deliberate. I pegged her for old money with new problems. "Archie Goodwin?" she asked. Her voice had no tremor, but her eyes were scanning the doorway like she was making a mental list of exit points. Always a good sign in my line of work. "That's me," I said. "And you're here to see Nero Wolfe." "I am. I have a situation. Don't they all?" I stepped aside and let her in. She hesitated one beat, maybe deciding if stepping over our threshold meant more than just a conversation, and then entered. I led her to the office, which still had that rare moment of peace before Wolfe descended, like a man returning to his throne. She didn't sit until I gestured. I liked that. It meant she knew how to wait her turn but wouldn't pretend. "To enjoy it, Miss Dr. Nero Wolfe," she said. "I'm a sensory scientist, flavor chemistry. I develop compounds for luxury food brands." She gave me a card, gold edge, no fluff. "And I'm not here about a crime," I smiled. "They never are." At that moment, the door to the office opened, and in came Wolfe exactly on time. He looked at her, then at me, and then took the big chair like gravity had assigned it to him. "You are disturbing my morning," he said, which for him was the equivalent of a handshake. "Speak concisely." Dr. Voss didn't bristle. "A few weeks ago, one of my team members disappeared, Jasper Lively. He was brilliant but erratic. Yesterday, I received a spice sample in the mail. It was addressed to me, postmarked from Manhattan. No return label. Inside was a compound we were working on. One that didn't exist outside our lab, except now someone else has it." Wolfe pressed his fingers together. "You're a scientist. Report theft to your institution or the police." I tried. "They don't care unless something explodes or someone bleeds." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a vial, tightly sealed and packed in a padded container. This is subtle sabotage. Someone is using what Jasper created, and they want me to know it." I looked at Wolfe. He didn't blink. But I'd been around long enough to know when a case had tickled his curiosity, like a rare, bitter herb thrown into a stew. "You're not concerned about Mr. Lively's safety," he said. "I am," she replied. "But I'm more concerned someone's making a move against me and using my own work to do it. Why come to me?" She looked around the room, and her eyes settled on the books, the globe, the ceiling moldings, then back to Wolfe. "Because this started in silence, and it will end in silence unless someone understands what to listen for. That did it." Wolfe snorted through his nose. "Pfui, Mr. Goodwin, take down her full account. I will determine if this warrants my attention." He stood and without another glance at Dr. Voss left the room. She looked at me. I raised my brows. "Congratulations," I said. "You just made it past the velvet rope. Now let's find out. Why?" The brownstone disturbed. Flavor of intrusion. There are two types of people who enter Nero Wolfe's office uninvited: fools and clients. Dr. Nero Wolfe, to her credit, was neither. But the room reacted to her like it does to most things that don't belong. A subtle change in pressure, like when you close a heavy door behind you and realize you're not alone. She sat neatly on the edge of the red armchair, both hands on her knees. Her coat was folded across her lap like she meant to leave any second, but we both knew better. You don't ring Wolfe's bell unless you're ready to sit in his parlor and air something ugly. So, I said, clicking my pen open, start at the top. Who's Jasper Lively, and why does his disappearing act come with a spice packet? She glanced at the office door Wolfe had exited through, as if hoping he might return and do the heavy lifting. When he didn't, she cleared her throat. Jasper joined Voss and Vale Labs 2 years ago. He was a volatile hire, brilliant with formulation, erratic with deadlines, and obsessed with the chemistry of memory. He believed food could trigger suppressed emotions, even memories beyond nostalgia. He was trying to reverse engineer what he called emotive triggers in flavor compounds. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like he wanted to make your dinner. Cry or confess something, she said. We all humored him until he produced something last fall that did exactly what he claimed. We called it Compound A7. I tasted it once, and I remembered something from boarding school I hadn't thought of in 20 years. Not just a memory, emotion, physical sensation, everything. That was enough to pause me. I've seen plenty of people exaggerate for effect, but her tone was clipped and matter-of-fact. No drama, just data. Who else had access to this Compound A7, I asked. 3 of us. Myself, Jasper, and my business partner, Ethan Vale. Ethan and I co-founded the lab. We have 10 staff, but we don't let them near the development suite. We're the only ones cleared for experimental work. Tell me about Vale. He's methodical, corporate, precise. He wants marketable formulas and predictable outcomes. He was skeptical of Jasper, but impressed by A7. We agreed to test it in controlled studies. Then Jasper started pushing for more access, fewer guardrails. 2 months ago, he stormed out after a fight with Ethan about intellectual ownership. We haven't seen him since. And now he's mailing you homemade spice bombs? She looked down at her lap. This isn't a prank. This is a message. I don't know who sent it, but it's Jasper's work. And someone wanted me to feel it. I picked up the vial she'd brought. It was sealed, but the packaging was deliberate. High-end glass, foam lining, airtight, not tossed together by someone living out of a duffel bag. I'm not in the habit of licking anonymous test tubes, I said. But I assume you verified it. She nodded. I ran it through the spectrometer. It's not just a match for A7. It's a more advanced version, meaning Jasper didn't vanish. He evolved. Before I could ask another question, Fritz appeared in the doorway with the tact of a butler and the instincts of a spy. Mr. Wolfe will see you again, Miss Voss, he said. She stood, smoothed her coat, and followed Fritz like she was heading into a deposition. I waited a moment, then followed. When I reached the office, Wolfe was seated with his usual gravity. Lenora stood before his desk, hands behind her back, like a student in front of the headmaster. You will provide Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe was saying, with the names and contact information for Mr. Vale and the other lab associates. He will visit your lab tomorrow and collect impressions. I do not make inquiries blind. Dr. Voss nodded. I understand. Do you? Wolfe's tone was not sharp, just heavy. Your case is not of murder or theft, but of intrusion. You suspect sabotage. Sabotage is a personal crime. Yes. Then this is not about Jasper Lively, Wolfe concluded. It is about you, and what you are trying to protect. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The quiet in the room was sharper than anything spoken. After she left, Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. She disturbs the air, he murmured. There is a precision to her, yet she tolerates chaos. Pfui! I waited. He opened one eye. Well, I said, if she's right, then someone is cooking with memories, and if she's wrong, then someone wants her to think so. Wolfe grunted. Then let us begin with the ingredients. A circle of suspects. Bitter notes and base compounds. Tuesday morning had the kind of crisp grey light that makes Manhattan look like it's been chilled in a wine cellar. I put on my coat, took a notepad, and gave Fritz my solemn promise not to return with unvetted riffraff. He gave me a look that said he'd enforce it with a carving knife if he had to. Dr. Voss's lab was downtown, Soho adjacent, just far enough from the chaos to seem sophisticated, and just close enough to still smell the bagels. The sign on the door read, Voss and Vale Sensory Design, in understated serif. Very hush-hush. You could walk past it 10 times and never know. They were bottling the emotional trauma of your 6th birthday. Inside it was polished glass and soft lighting, a receptionist with rimless glasses, and the expression of someone who could recite chemical formulas in her sleep greeted me with the alert boredom of a well-trained gatekeeper. "I'm here to see Dr. Voss," I said, handing her the card Wolfe had printed on one of his rare mornings of professional generosity. She picked up the phone, murmured something, and nodded toward a sleek glass door. "You'll be meeting with Mr. Vale first." I was escorted through a narrow corridor with temperature controls more advanced than most emergency rooms. The lab, when I entered, was divided into stations, each one housing chrome tools, micro-batch equipment, and a fridge labeled Caution. Experimental olfactants Ethan Vale was waiting, standing by a stainless steel island, arms crossed. He was in his 40s, tall, with salt and pepper temples that looked curated. His suit was dark grey, no tie, just the right amount of business casual menace. He didn't offer to shake hands. "So," he said, "Nero Wolfe sent you." "That's right. Archie Goodwin. I do the field work. He stays home and rearranges. People's motives until they snap." Vale didn't smile. "Dr. Voss informed me that Jasper's work may have resurfaced. That's a problem. That's why I'm here. Tell me about your last encounter with him." He walked to a side table and poured himself tea from a white ceramic pot. No offer for me, which told me what kind of host he was. Jasper was unstable, he said. Genius, yes, but the type that believes rules are for slower minds. He didn't care about protocol, trials, or intellectual property. We brought him in as a wild card, thinking we could contain him. We couldn't. What was the last straw? He wanted to skip regulatory approval, claim A7 as his sole invention, said we were hiding the soul of the work behind NDAs and food safety clauses. I told him to take a sabbatical. He took it permanently. And you didn't report anything missing? There was nothing to report. No sample disappeared. He didn't steal equipment. He just left. Until now. Vale walked to a refrigerated drawer, keyed in a code and pulled out a small vial. This was the last known batch of A7. It's been under triple seal. What Dr. Voss received wasn't from this container. Which means Jasper recreated it, I said. Or someone else did, Vale said. Someone close enough to know the process. Such as... Vale looked at me for a long beat. Ask Owen. Owen? Owen Mitra, lead synthesis technician. He was Jasper's shadow for 6 months, worshipped him, then turned on him when Jasper stopped crediting his input. They had words. One of them left. The other stayed. Where? Is Owen now? Vale checked his watch. Downstairs running scent dispersal protocols. You can speak with him, just don't touch anything. Downstairs was more industrial. Rows of diffusers, olfactory tunnels, computers with compound modeling. Software. Owen Mitra was hunched over a terminal, typing with the rapid, furious rhythm of a man, either solving something or deleting something in a hurry. He was mid-30s, lanky, and wore a hoodie under his lab coat. His dark hair flopped over one eye, and he looked up like he'd been pulled out of a trance. "You're with Voss?" he asked. "I'm with Wolfe," I corrected, looking into a certain ghost in the spice machine. His face didn't change, but his shoulders did, a twitch I'd seen on men who knew more than they were willing to admit on the first go. Jasper's alive, I said. Or someone has his work. Everyone has his work, Owen muttered. That's the problem. He never wrote anything down. He made people watch him. Like it was a magic act. Did he trust you? No one trusted Jasper, but he liked having an audience. I watched. I memorized things. So did others. Others. Lana Morrow. Trial manager. She dated him. Until she didn't, I made a note. Let me guess. Ugly breakup? No, he said. Too clean. One day she just stopped talking about him, like she'd been scrubbed. And now? She keeps to herself. Works odd hours. She's still here if you're asking. But don't expect tears. I left Owen staring into a terminal full of code he wasn't about to explain and went looking for Lana. I found her in the sensory booth, a climate-controlled room with amber lighting, rows of glass flasks, and a neutral scent that smelled like expensive nothing. She was tall, pale, and wore her hair in a tight braid. Her eyes tracked me with clinical interest, like I was a test subject who'd gotten lost. I'm not doing interviews, she said flatly. Good, I replied. This isn't an interview, it's a conversation about Jasper. A flicker in her eyes, gone in a second, but it had been there. Do you know where he is? If I did, I wouldn't be here. Did you help him? I helped him once, then I helped myself by leaving. Leaving what? Whatever bubble he was building. He believed flavor could expose secrets. People don't want their secrets exposed, Mr. Goodwin. They'll burn down the lab before that happens. Did he threaten anyone? Not with words, but with results. A7 wasn't just flavor. It was chemistry, mixed with psychology. It worked. And that scared Ethan, and it scared Lenora even more. Why? Because she saw what it did to me. Her voice didn't crack, but her hands were shaking slightly, enough to make the vial she held tremble against the amber light. I left her with that silence and returned to the brownstone at dusk. Wolfe was in the office with a glass of beer reading The Physiology of Taste for the 5th or 15th time. I gave him the notes, the suspects, the silence between the words. He looked up after 10 minutes of reading. There is no theft, he said. No disappearance, not yet. This is not a puzzle of action, Archie. It is a puzzle of intention. He set down the pages. We must learn who wants to remember something and who wants others to forget. Archie's legwork, lingering aftertastes. The next morning I stepped out of the brownstone with the kind of purpose Wolfe disapproves of, legs moving faster than logic, and my tie already wrinkling from enthusiasm. He'd say haste is for men without minds. But I say sometimes the street talks faster than the library. I had 3 names in my notebook, and a half-formed hunch that something was rotten in the freezer at Voss and Vale. The compound may have been rare, but the tension around it was aging into something far more familiar, envy, betrayal, and unspoken blackmail. I started with Lana Morrow. Her apartment was on the Lower East Side, pre-war brick, fire escape with real rust, the kind of building where rent control meant you inherited a ghost and a boiler that screamed at dawn. She buzzed me up after a pause that lasted exactly 4 Mississippis, which is long enough to consider lying, but short enough to decide you'd rather not be seen avoiding the truth. She opened the door in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, hair wet. It wasn't a welcome, it was a ceasefire. I'm not making coffee, she said. I brought mine. I lifted the paper cup. But I wouldn't mind a refill in a clean conscience. She didn't smile, but she let me in. The apartment was sparse, utilitarian. Bookshelves lined with scientific journals, a few dog-eared novels, and a single photograph. Her with Jasper, arms slung, both grinning like they didn't know the expiration date was stamped on the back. You're poking around the lab, she said, sitting on the arm of a chair. That won't win you friends? I don't make friends, I make notes. You're Wolfe's man, right? His legs and ears, the mouth's a bonus. That got the ghost of a smile. Then her face settled back into neutrality. Jasper was too smart for what he tried, she said. He believed the work would protect him, but work doesn't. People don't like to be made to feel vulnerable. Especially people with money riding on it. Who had something to lose? She rubbed her hands together. Everyone. Lenora saw the implications, legal, ethical. Ethan saw the bottom line. Owen saw the formula, and I... She trailed off. You saw Jasper, I finished. No, she said. I saw what Jasper didn't want me to see. That he was scared of what he'd made. He mailed that sample to Lenora because he wanted her attention, not revenge, validation. And now, he's vanished. No, she said, locking eyes with me. He's hiding. There's a difference. That wasn't the end of the conversation, but it was the last honest note. I left her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, like she was afraid the air itself would betray her. Next stop, Owen Mitra. Again. Because something about his eagerness to implicate Lana had the finesse of a magician's misdirection. If he was trying to wave me toward her, maybe I should look at his hands more closely. I found him outside the lab, smoking in an alley, which was ironic for a guy who spent his days building artificial aromatics. He looked up and didn't flinch. Back so soon? You said everyone had Jasper's formula. They did, if they watched closely. I watched closer. How close? I knew how he layered bitterness, how he buried triggers under warmth. He once said A7 worked like a confessional. It gave you guilt before memory. You wanted to tell someone what you didn't know you'd done. That's dangerous. Yeah, Owen said, flicking ash, but profitable. Did you ever taste it? He looked away. It made me remember the night my brother died. I hadn't been in the room, but the flavor, it made me feel like I had been, like I'd watched it. I didn't write that down. You don't put pain like that on paper unless you plan to frame it. So, I said, let's say you did have the formula. Could you have mailed it? I could have. A shrug. But I didn't. That's not my game. I don't provoke. I finish. Charming. Back in Midtown, I stopped for a sandwich and went over the notes. There were 3 commonalities among the suspects. All had proximity to Jasper's work. All claimed to fear its implications. None seemed particularly sad. He was gone. I called Wolfe from a payphone outside the deli. He hates mobile interruptions. He says cellular signals distort tone, and tone is everything. He picked up after the 3rd ring, yes. Vale, Lana, and Owen all had the motive, knowledge, or resentment required. Lana says Jasper is in hiding. Owen says everyone had access. Vale says nothing's missing. Contradictions are healthy, Wolfe said. Continue. There's one more name. Say junior associate, intern level. A kid named Mira Kess. Owen mentioned her in passing, said she used to take Jasper's notes. Unofficially. Wolfe grunted. Track her down. I find people at the edges of genius often reveal more than those standing at its center. I agreed, hung up, and made a few calls. Mira Kess wasn't listed in the staff directory, but after some coaxing and name-dropping with the lab's receptionist, I got her personal number. She answered like someone who wasn't used to answering. Unknown numbers. Breathless, uncertain. Miss Kess, this is Archie Goodwin. I know who you are, she said. You're looking into Jasper. You knew him. I transcribed his notes when no one else could read them. He thought better while talking. He'd ramble and I'd clean it up. I kept copies. I have them. I sat forward. Where are you? I'm at home, but I shouldn't talk to you. Why? Because someone else already did. I waited. She didn't. Explain, Miss Kess, if someone's threatened you. No, not threatened. They warned me someone doesn't want Jasper found. Not because they hate him, but because he remembers something. I swallowed that. Let it hang. I'll come. To you, I said. No. Her voice had changed, brisk, anxious. I'll come to you. But not at the lab. Somewhere neutral. We picked a time. Tomorrow morning. Bryant Park. Early. I hung up and stood on the curb for a while, watching steam rise from a manhole like the city was brewing something beneath my shoes. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, fingers steepled. She has notes, I said. Real ones, not fragments, and she's afraid. She should be, Wolfe murmured. Memory is an unstable element. He paused. You will meet her. Be precise. Do not speak of flavor, speak of trust. I nodded. And Archie? Yes? He opened one eye, the other still tucked behind thought. Bring gloves. Subtle trespass. The wrong jar. Bryant Park in the early morning is one of those rare slices of New York that pretends it's in another city. It still has the pigeons, the coffee carts, and the guy doing Tai Chi in a fedora. But there's also a hush to it, like the buildings around it are waiting for something to happen before they fully wake up. Mira Kess was already on the bench. When I arrived, sitting stiff-backed with a reusable coffee cup in her lap and a messenger bag, gripped like it contained nuclear launch codes. Miss Kess, I said. She nodded. Her eyes were rimmed with sleep, or maybe nerves, or maybe both. She looked like someone used to sitting quietly in meetings and watching people forget she was there. You came alone? She asked. Always. Wolfe doesn't like the outdoors, unless it's breaded and fried. She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth gave a twitch. Good enough, I sat beside her, leaving the space of one neutral opinion between us. I brought these, she said, pulling a folder from her bag. It was thick, worn, and clipped with 3 different kinds of tabs. Inside were pages, handwritten, typed, annotated, and scribbled on napkins that still had the faint outlines of coffee rings. These are Jasper's notes, she said. All pre-A7, but some formulas lead there. I flipped through them. Even the typed ones had an edge of madness. Recipes crossed with memories, flavor profiles described with words like shame and reverence. He didn't think in measurements, Mira said. He thought in reactions. He'd say, add just enough to make someone remember their mother's perfume, but not enough to make them cry. Then I'd try to guess what chemical ratio that meant. You were close? I was invisible, which made me safe. You don't sound safe now. She hesitated. 2 nights ago, someone came to my apartment. Nothing was taken, but the notes had been moved. I keep them in the bottom drawer of my desk. When I opened it that morning, the folder was on top, neat, as if someone wanted me to know. I closed the folder. They didn't want to steal. They wanted to send a message. Yes, she said quietly. That it wasn't mine to share. Did you tell Dr. Voss? She looked at me like I'd suggested calling a wolf to babysit. Sheep. No, Lenora's brilliant, but she has one weakness, control. If she thinks someone's handling her problem without permission, she will remove them. And you think this is her problem? She hesitated. I think she knows more than she's letting on, and I think Jasper's disappearance wasn't the start, it was the reaction. That was all I got from Mira. She left with a nervous glance over her shoulder and promised to stay somewhere less predictable for a few days. I took the notes and made straight for the brownstone. When I handed Wolfe the folder, he opened it like it might bite him. Curious, he murmured. This is not scientific literature. It is narrative disguised as chemistry. That's Jasper's specialty, I said. Cooking with memory, stirring guilt into gravy. He pulled one sheet and read it aloud. Compound 3C, to be used after betrayal, but before grief. Pfui. He dropped the page and rang for Fritz. Bring the spice rack, he said. Now let me tell you something about Wolfe's spice rack. It's not a rack. It's a cabinet built by a Viennese artisan who believed that order was the only barrier between civilization and anarchy. Every jar is labeled in Wolfe's hand. Latin names cross-indexed to origin and year. There are 5 kinds of cinnamon, 8 peppers, and 1 mysterious unlabeled vial that Wolfe claims is for emergencies. Fritz handles it like it's sacred, because it is. Fritz wheeled it in and left without a word. Wolfe opened the cabinet, removed 3 jars, and one by one opened the lids, sniffed, and frowned. Something's been disturbed. You mean the labels? No, the order. The jars have been moved. I leaned over. Looks the same to me. Because you're not an obsessive, thank heaven. This jar of cube pepper was behind the long pepper. It is now in front. Fritz would sooner misplace his pancreas. I narrowed my eyes. So someone was here. Someone who knew how not to leave a mark. But left one anyway, Wolfe said, because intention always leaves residue. We took inventory. 1 jar was wrong in another way. The jar labeled asafoetida smelled off. Not entirely different, just a touch too sharp, too medicinal. Wolfe opened it and took a single whiff. This is not from my collection, he said coldly. Someone swapped the jar. Swapped it for what? I won't hazard a guess without analysis, but it's recent, within days. That was the moment Wolfe's attitude changed. Not visibly, mind you. He didn't gasp or throw his beer glass against the wall. But I've seen him during a dinner interrupted by a burned sauce, and this had the same glint of violation. The brownstone had been entered, not just physically, but symbolically. Someone had trespassed. I called Saul Panzer. If you've never met Saul, just know this. If I were to disappear tomorrow, I'd want him looking for me. He's got the instincts of a bloodhound and the wardrobe of a librarian. He doesn't blink, doesn't brag, and has found more missing husbands, mistresses, and money clips than any 10 other detectives combined. I gave him the details. The vial, the tampering, Mira's break-in. I want to know if Jasper's surfaced, I told him. Anywhere. Lab rentals, boutique kitchens, fragrant startups, anything unusual. And check Voss and Vale's delivery records for the last 3 weeks, especially anything addressed to Lenora Voss. I'll report in 48, he said, and hung up. By then it was evening. Wolfe was back in his chair, the offending jar now sealed and placed beside him like a disobedient pet. I abhor intrusion, Archie. I know. Someone has entered this house and left a warning. Not for me, for Miss Voss, but they used my kitchen as a medium. They wanted your attention. They have it. He didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Just sat there staring at the spice jar, turning over the violation like a chess position he hadn't expected. And in that silence, something else occurred to me. Whoever had come into the brownstone hadn't stolen anything. They hadn't even tried. They'd replaced something, left a trace, a signal, which meant they didn't want the formula. They wanted us to find them, and Wolfe, despite everything, had just accepted the invitation. Increased pressure. Ghosts in the recipe. By Wednesday afternoon, the brownstone was on. Alert. Wolfe's version of high alert, that is. No sirens, no panic. Just a stillness so sharp it cut. Fritz didn't hum while decanting sauces, and even the orchids seemed to grow quieter. The swapped spice jar now rested in Wolfe's office, sealed in a glass cloche like a relic of a defiled temple. I'd done what I could. I'd called the alarm company. No breaches. I checked with Fritz. No unscheduled visitors, no forgotten deliveries. I even called the flower market. No one had dropped off anything resembling a spice container. Whoever entered the brownstone knew what they were doing and when to do it. That night, just after dinner, Wolfe rang for me. He sat behind his desk with his fingers templed and the expression of a man rehearsing a chess move he didn't like but couldn't avoid. "Saul," he asked. "He'll report in the morning, said there's a trail." "Good, because our intruder is preparing a second move." "Because of the spice?" "No, Archie, because silence is no longer useful to them." I didn't have to wait. Longed to see what he meant. At 10 o'clock sharp, I got a call. Fritz picked up, then passed it to me with one word. Urgent. It was Mira Kess. Her voice was fast and tight, like she was trying to outrun what she was saying. Someone followed me. Where are you? In a cab. I doubled back, changed cars, ducked into a shop on Spring Street. But someone's watching. Me. Go to the brownstone. No, she said. I can't bring it there again. I'll go to the public library, Midtown, the research room. I'll be there. I hung up, grabbed my coat and headed out. 25 minutes later, I stepped into the New York Public Library's marble cathedral of silence and spotted Mira at a far table under the chandelier. She was gripping her bag, her back to the wall. No. One followed you in, I said. I circled twice. That doesn't mean they're gone. Who are they? She looked around. I don't know, but they know I gave you the notes. They know I spoke to you. How? She bit her lip. Because this morning a vial of A7 was on my doorstep. No note, just the vial. Full? She nodded. I didn't open it. Good girl. I took the vial with my handkerchief. This one was slightly different, clearer glass, a green-tinted stopper. Same fluid weight, same faint smell. But something about it felt presented, not a warning. Not a threat, a gift or bait. Lenora has to know, Mira whispered. Why? Because she asked me to destroy Jasper's backups months ago. I didn't. I just moved them. She asked you directly? Yes. After he left. She said he'd become unstable and we needed to protect the lab. She never said why. That changed the temperature of the room. I escorted Mira to a cab and paid the driver myself to deliver her to a hotel uptown, booked under a different name. I'd called ahead and arranged it. Wolfe believes in control. I believe in insurance. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was awake, waiting in the office. This, I said, placing the second vial on his desk, was left for Mira. She's been followed. She says Lenora asked her to destroy Jasper's backups. After he left, Wolfe leaned in and examined the vial without touching it. Then Miss Voss is either the protector of his legacy or the suppressor of it, or both. Quite. He rang for Fritz. Call Mr. Panzer. Have him come now. 10 minutes later, Saul arrived in a grey overcoat that still looked pressed despite the wind. He took a seat beside the desk and got straight to business. I found the lab rental. Jasper used a temporary address under a pseudonym, Eric Dinshaw. Small experimental kitchen in Alphabet City. Rented for 6 weeks. Term ended 3 days ago. Was it used? Frequently. Light power draw but regular late-night access. Deliveries every 3 days. Glassware, spices, lab gloves. No known forwarding address. Paid in cash. What else? Voss and Vale's mailroom shows 2 undocumented deliveries. One to Ethan Vale, one to Lenora. Neither reported. Both signed for under initials, MK and OM. Mira and Owen, I said. Possibly. But the packages were redirected. Sent from the lab, then reshipped. No return sender. The courier says the boxes were wrapped in waxed paper and smelled faintly like, wait for it, clove. Wolfe grunted. Symbolic. Jasper was fond of theatrical touches. Could Vale or Voss have sent them? More likely, Wolfe said. They received them and chose silence over disclosure. Why? Because public knowledge of A7 would jeopardize their entire operation. Wolfe stared at the second vial, fingers laced. We have trespass. Surveillance. Psychological leverage. This is no longer the aftermath of Jasper's departure. It is the start of someone's design. Saul leaned in. You think someone wants Jasper found? Wolfe nodded. Yes, but only under specific terms. Terms they control. Saul left just after midnight. Wolfe sat for another hour without speaking. Then finally, we will convene them. All of them? Yes. Here. He closed his eyes. It is time we test the flavor of truth. Wolfe's positioning, the conduction of guilt. If Nero Wolfe had been a general instead of a detective, he'd have conquered continents without ever leaving his study. He didn't believe in brute force or battlefield chaos, just The right pressure applied at the right angle until someone folded. So when he told me he wanted everyone summoned to the brownstone, I knew it wasn't just a meeting. It was a campaign. I started making calls at 9 sharp Thursday morning, using the tone that says optional, the way a lion might say lunch. Lenora Voss, Ethan Vale, Owen Mitra, Lana Morrow and Mira Kess. All 5 were invited for a private discussion at Wolfe's home that evening. No explanations, no promises. Just Wolfe's name and the implication that saying no would be remembered by 6 o'clock. The lineup was complete. Fritz, impeccable as ever, arranged the office for the gathering. Extra chairs, fresh napkins, discreet trays of canapes that Wolfe would pretend not to eat. The 2 vials, one mailed to Lenora, one left for Mira, were placed side by side on a silver tray, gleaming like twin confessions under glass. At precisely 6:30, Wolfe entered the office and took his seat, a motion that seemed to rearrange gravity. I stood to one side, notebook in hand. Everyone else was seated around him like guests at a dinner where the entree might be gilt. Wolfe opened his eyes. You all know why you are here, or more precisely, you know what you are here about. Jasper Lively, compound A7, and the increasingly flagrant violations of civility surrounding them. Silence. No one shifted. I abhor disruption, Wolfe went on. I have tolerated it thus far because Miss Voss presented her concerns with restraint, and Mr. Goodwin verified their gravity. But yesterday someone entered my home. That landed. Wolfe gestured to the tray with the 2 vials. One of you or your agent replaced a jar in my private spice cabinet with this formulation, not stolen, replaced. A message. To me. I am responding in kind. He leaned forward slightly. Tonight, you will explain yourselves. No one spoke. Miss Voss, Wolfe said without raising his voice, you may begin. Why did you conceal the second delivery? Lenora Voss didn't flinch. She was in a tailored black coat, her hair pinned up like she was presenting at a conference, not a reckoning. I received a vial similar to that one 5 days ago, she said evenly. It was addressed to me, unmarked, but I recognized the compound. I destroyed it. Why conceal its arrival? Because I didn't want panic or attention. I believed Jasper was trying to provoke me. To what end, she hesitated. I don't know. But you asked Miss Kess to destroy his backups. Yes. Why? Because I knew what the compound could do. I tasted A7 once. It triggered a memory I had buried for decades, a private failure. It was too effective. If it ever left our lab, it could be weaponized emotionally. I wanted it gone, but not reported. No. Why not? Now she hesitated. Because the moment the authorities are involved, so are patents, and liability, and lawsuits. We had no proof Jasper had taken anything. And frankly, I didn't trust the rest of my team. Mr. Vale, Wolfe said, turning his gaze. Ethan Vale adjusted his cuffs. I didn't know Lenora destroyed the second sample. Wolfe nodded. Did you receive one? Vale didn't blink. Yes, last week. I didn't destroy it. I had it analyzed. It was a stronger variant of A7. Cleaner structure, same emotional volatility. Did you report this to Dr. Voss? No, she was already on edge. And she's right, this isn't about crime, it's about control. Someone is trying to destabilize us. Wolfe turned to Owen Mitra. You were Jasper's shadow. Did you have the knowledge to recreate A7? Yes, Owen said flatly. Did you? No, I could have. I didn't. Why not? Because I knew someone else would. Miss Morrow, Wolfe said. Lana looked up. She wore a wool coat, loose at the collar, no jewelry. Her voice was calm but cool. Jasper was dangerous, not because of what he made, because he didn't understand what it could do to people. Did you receive a vial? I did not, but I believe someone wants us to know he's alive. You said before, I cut in, that Jasper was hiding, not gone. Still think so? She nodded. Jasper wouldn't disappear completely. He'd watch. He liked to be the ghost in the corner. Mira Kess sat near the end of the semicircle. Wolfe turned to her now, voice gentler. You were followed, your notes were disturbed, you've been used. Why? Mira swallowed. Because I knew Jasper's language, the way he thought. Someone wanted to remind me of that. Wolfe exhaled. Very well. Then let us be clear. This is not about theft. This is about leverage. He gestured to the vials again. Someone here has been receiving, sharing, or possibly creating variants of A7. To what purpose? Emotional manipulation, blackmail, memory excavation? I do not care. He rose slightly, rare enough to be dramatic. I care that someone entered my home to send a message wrapped in chemistry and guilt. He turned his gaze across the room like a beam sweeping a harbor. This ends now. You will all remain available. You will not discard anything. You will speak to Mr. Goodwin when requested. And you, will each of you prepare to have your recollections tested? Tested? Vale said sharply. Yes, Wolfe said. One of you still has a sample. Perhaps several. I want it brought here. No, Lenora said. It's too dangerous. More dangerous, Wolfe said, than leaving it in your freezer while someone plays puppeteer with your staff? I think not. He sat back down. You may go. And just like that, they began to file out. One by one. No objections. Just silence. Tension and the faint smell of memory in the air. When the last guest was gone, Wolfe sighed. They will not sleep tonight. Should I? No. I need you to go back to Voss and Vale tomorrow. Someone will slip, either in action or omission. And if no one does? He reached for his beer. Then I will make them. The office gathering. A taste that won't leave. By Friday afternoon, Wolfe's patience was thinner than his trust in thermostats. He'd spent the morning reading over Mira's notes, flipping through Jasper's maddened formulas, as if looking for a confession spelled out in compound ratios. What he found, if anything, he didn't share. He just sat there with that look that meant things were moving, and someone was about to step into a bear trap made entirely of logic. At 2:30, the phone rang. Wolfe picked it up himself. That happens roughly once every 6 months. Mr. Panzer, he said, then silence. He listened for a long moment, his eyes narrowed, then closed entirely. When he opened them, he simply said, "Thank you." He hung up, reached for the bell, and rang. I came in from the kitchen where Fritz had been dicing something Wolfe would later pretend not to eat. "Summon them," Wolfe said. "All of them, tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "We doing this now?" "We are," he said. "Mr. Panzer has confirmed what I suspected." "And what's that?" He gave me a small, unsatisfying smile, that the formula was never the real danger. Memory was. By 7 p.m. they were all seated in Wolfe's office again, the second time in 2 days, and this time the room felt less like a parlor and more like a crucible. There was no small talk, just the steady ticking of the wall clock, and the sense that Wolfe had tightened the leash on the entire city and was now ready to give it a tug. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe said without preamble, "this is not an inquiry. It is a resolution. You are here because each of you contributed to the present tension, by omission, by silence, or by intent." He glanced at me. I opened my notebook. "A brief recap," I said. 3 vials have surfaced. 1 mailed to Dr. Voss, 1 left, for Miss Kess, and 1 that replaced a spice jar in Mr. Wolfe's kitchen. All contain variants of A7. We now have reason to believe a 4th sample exists, currently unreported. Wolfe turned to Vale. "Mr. Vale, I will spare you the posturing. You did not destroy your sample. You refined it and you mailed the result." Ethan Vale's mouth opened, closed. Then, "You have no proof." Mr. Panzer observed a private courier deliver a small package from your apartment to a holding box rented by Miss Morrow under a false name. Lana Morrow blinked sharply. "What? You received that fourth vial 2 days ago," Wolfe continued, turning toward her. "You said nothing. You believed it came from Jasper. It did not. It came from Mr. Vale. Why would he—" "To test your reaction," Wolfe said. "You were closest to Jasper. Vale needed to know how much you remembered and how much you might say." Ethan stood, but Wolfe didn't flinch. "Sit down." And Vale did. I'll give him that. He knew when the room had changed temperature. "But," Wolfe said, turning his gaze again, "Mr. Vale is not the principal instigator. He is a reactor, a strategist." "Miss Voss," Lenora looked up, expression unreadable. "You are the reason this all began." "I brought you this case," she said calmly. "Yes, with reluctance, because someone forced your hand." He gestured toward the vials. "You received a sample of A7. It unlocked something in you, a memory. I do not know what it was, nor do I wish to. But I know what you did next. You tried to bury it. You instructed Miss Kess to destroy Jasper's records. You destroyed your own sample, but it was too late." Wolfe leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter, not softer. "You did not fear the formula. You feared what you'd forgotten, and what Jasper made you remember." For the first time, Lenora faltered. "I didn't expect it to work." "Indeed, but it did. And once it did, you tried to control the narrative. You told no one, but someone else knew. Someone else remembered something too." He turned to Owen. "Owen Mitra." Owen's hands twitched in his lap. "You did not recreate A7, you couldn't. But you knew Jasper's triggers, and you had access to Dr. Voss's calendar, her mail, her habits. You think You replaced the spice jar in my kitchen." Owen blinked. "Why would I?" "Because you wanted to drag this into the open," Wolfe said. "You saw Vale maneuvering behind the scenes. You saw Voss hiding what she knew, and you wanted someone to pay attention." Owen looked stunned and guilty, which I'll admit I hadn't been entirely prepared for. Wolfe had threaded the needle with that one. "You trespassed," Wolfe said. "You left a sample in Miss Kess's home, and you monitored her. I imagine you justified it to yourself as loyalty, but you endangered her, and me. Phooey." "I didn't mean to—" "No," Wolfe said. "You never do." He let that sit. Then he folded his hands. "But this still leaves one man unaccounted for. Jasper Lively." Everyone looked around. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Mr. Lively is alive. That much I am certain of, but he is no longer the threat. His creation is, and each of you in turn tried to master it." He looked at Lenora. "You buried it, Vale. You repurposed it, Owen. You used it as leverage, Mira. You preserved it, perhaps too faithfully, and Lana. You left him." Silence. Then Wolfe stood. "An event. You will all leave now. But understand this. Any further manipulation of each other, of the compound, of the truth, will be reported. Not to the press, not to investors, to the authorities, where intent is irrelevant and motive gets you a cell." He turned to me. "Archie, see them out." They filed out, quiet, shaken, like people leaving a séance where the ghost had answered. When they were gone, Wolfe returned to his chair and closed his eyes. "Do you think Jasper will resurface?" I asked. "He already has," Wolfe said, "through his work." "Will we hear from him?" "No," Wolfe said, "but others will. A7 is out there now. The genie does not return to the bottle." He lifted the cloche and held one vial to the light. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Have Fritz destroy these. Quietly. Completely." I took the tray. Wolfe turned his gaze to the fire which had burned low. A taste once acquired cannot be undone. That is the tragedy of memory, and the appeal of forgetting. The reveal. Memory measured. Precisely. The next morning began the way most endings do in Wolfe's world, with silence, followed by digestion. He was in the dining room finishing his soft-boiled eggs and sipping a beer with the methodical precision of a man sealing a vault. The spice cabinet had been purged, sanitized, resealed by Fritz. The vials were gone. Fritz had boiled them down in a vinegar bath and disposed of the remnants like they were radioactive, which they might as well have been. I poured myself coffee and waited. Wolfe didn't speak until he'd set his spoon on the saucer. Everything that follows, he said, will happen without us. But before it does, there must be clarity. Good, I said, because I'm still short one ghost. Wolfe grunted. Jasper Lively, yes. He stood and moved, deliberately, like always, into the office. I followed, notebook in hand, although by now I suspected this would be less note-taking and more final reckoning. Jasper Lively, Wolfe began, settling into his chair, is not hiding because he fears arrest. Nor is he a fugitive of law. He is hiding because he succeeded. A7 was not theoretical. It worked, and it worked too well. I nodded. We've heard as much from all directions. Indeed. But what they did not say, and what they could not say, is what exactly A7 triggered. The true fear was never about public exposure or financial liability. It was about personal history, intimate guilt. Lenora. Yes. Miss Voss experienced something after ingesting A7, something deeply repressed. So did Vale, Mira, perhaps even Owen. The sample was a mirror, not of the past but of the emotion buried beneath it. He lifted a page from Mira's collection of notes. Jasper's handwriting, scrawled in manic curls. Memory is taste sharpened by grief. Flavor as vehicle. Emotion as key. Wolfe let it fall back to the desk. This was not a chemical weapon, he said. It was a form of therapy, dangerous, uncontrolled, irreversible. And the greatest crime committed was not its creation, but its misuse as a means of control. Vale mailing samples, Owen planting them, Voss destroying hers. Exactly, each one of them chose manipulation over transparency. And Jasper? Wolfe leaned back. Jasper Lively is a philosopher, not a criminal. He created something. That demanded accountability from its users. The others tried to escape that. So where is he now? Panzer found a clue, Wolfe said. You recall the lab rented under the name Eric Dinshaw? Sure. Jasper's maternal grandfather. A pseudonym he's used before on published college papers in fringe chemistry journals. But more telling, the lease was extended, quietly, under a second alias. No longer for lab work. For storage. Storage of what? Not equipment, not materials. Records. Jasper has been recording the reactions of everyone who has used A7. He has a file on each of them. Audio, video, biochemical notes, I whistled. He's building a case. Yes, not for legal recourse, for moral demonstration. Wolfe's voice dropped a register. He is planning to release them. It landed like thunder in a soundproof room. Wait, I said. He's going to leak people's memories? Only those triggered by A7. Anonymous at first, but the connections will be traceable. It will take only one match and the whole framework collapses. Why? Wolfe gave me the kind of look usually reserved for men who try to stir his beer. Because Jasper Lively believes truth is ethical, not optional, and he has no desire for vengeance, only absolution, collective, merciless. And what's our play? Wolfe closed his eyes. None. None? He has violated no law. His compound was never patented, stolen, or weaponized in any legally definable sense. The trespasses committed were by others. But if he releases that data, then reputations will dissolve. Partnerships will fracture. Careers will end. But no one will die. And Mr. Goodwin, I am not the guardian of professional vanity. I took that in slowly. So we just let it happen. We do, Wolfe said, because stopping it would mean destroying the records, suppressing his findings, or silencing the man himself. And I will not participate in the erasure of truth, even inconvenient truth. I thought of Mira clutching her bag, Vale's stiff denials, Lana's blank expression, Owen's raw confession in the alley. You think they'll survive it? They will adapt, or they won't. Miss Voss in particular may come out stronger, should she choose to reconcile with her memory rather than suppress it. And if she doesn't, then she will remain brilliant, cold and isolated, which is not a crime, merely a fate. There was a knock. Fritz entered with 2 plates, lamb ragout, flatbread, and a chilled beet salad Wolfe had specifically requested. He thanked Fritz, then said to me, "This is the end of our role. No final confrontation." Wolfe's lip twitched. "I've already had it." "When?" He picked up his fork. "Last night, with the idea that I should interfere." He tasted the lamb, chewed slowly. Then, delicious. The aftermath. Only the tongue remembers. 3 days later, the brownstone returned to its natural state, silent, sealed, and smelling faintly of bay laurel and boiled marrow bone. The newspapers hadn't caught on. No headlines about memory compounds, no panic over emotional espionage. But the ripples were spreading. Quietly, Vale and Voss issued a vague press statement announcing a strategic restructuring at the lab. Lana Morrow resigned from her position entirely. Owen, according to Saul's sources, took a sabbatical and left town, possibly Montreal. Mira Kess never returned to the office. She sent a letter of resignation, no forwarding address, Jasper Lively. Not a whisper, but his absence felt like a broadcast. I was back at my desk sorting case notes when Wolfe finally emerged from his orchids. He wore a fresh yellow ascot and an expression that said he'd resolved something during a heated discussion with a plant. He sat, rang for Fritz, and asked, without preamble, for duck confit and warm lentils with thyme. It was 11:30. In the morning I closed my notebook. "So that's it?" "Yes," he said. "A7 is out there, Voss and Vale are pretending it isn't, and Jasper's building some anonymous confessional archive in a rented sub-basement." He grunted. "Presumably. And you're done." "I am always done, Mr. Goodwin. It is others who flail for closure." I leaned back. "You ever wonder what your flavor would be if someone distilled your emotional core?" Wolfe made a face like I'd asked him to name a favorite sport. "That is a juvenile question. Come on, I'm not saying I'd bottle it, just humor me." He closed his eyes. "If I had a flavor," he said, "it would not trigger memory. It would trigger restraint, the sense that one has had precisely enough, no more, no less." "Sounds like nutmeg," I said, with a hint of salt and a smug. "Finish?" He ignored that. Fritz entered with the duck. The tray gleamed. The lentils were arranged in a perfect semicircle, and the thyme was fresh enough to still whisper its Latin name if coaxed. Wolfe took a bite and exhaled like a man reacquainted with justice. "You do realize," I said, "we're sitting on the edge of something. If Jasper publishes anything, even anonymously, the whole sensory industry could get spooked." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "Let them be spooked. Science survives scandal. And ethics?" "Ethics," he said slowly, "survive memory." I nodded, scribbled it down. "That your closing remark?" "Possibly." He reached for his beer, but then paused and added, "Miss Voss may never forgive herself for what she remembered. Mr. Vale will convince himself he acted rationally. Miss Morrow will ache in silence, and Mr. Mitra will spend years trying to forget what he tasted in that vial." He looked at me now, fully. "But the tongue, Archie, is not an instrument of forgetting. It is the gatekeeper of the past. And the past is patient. Fritz silently placed a second glass on Wolfe's tray. For me. I took it. What about Mira? I asked. She will recover, Wolfe said. She is not fragile, only young. And Jasper? He was never trying to harm them, Wolfe said, only to make them honest. You think that's noble? I think, he said, it is rare. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, Manhattan droned on. Taxi horns, pedestrian, chatter, the soft grind of commerce. But here inside the brownstone it was calm. Wolfe ate. I watched. A rare case where the villain never showed, the crime was never named, and the victory was survival, not triumph. And yet something had been resolved. Not legally, not publicly, but intimately. Wolfe wiped his mouth with his linen napkin, then added one final thought, quietly, as if only the orchids would overhear. There is no justice in memory, Archie. Only balance. I let that sit for a beat, then stood. Good thing we never lose ours, I said. Speak for yourself, Wolfe murmured. I try every day. It's funny what sticks. 3 weeks later, the news cycle still hadn't caught a whiff of Jasper, lively A7, or the quiet tremor it sent through an industry that trades in illusion. There was no scandal, no lawsuit, no dramatic expose. Just an elegant silence, exactly the kind Nero Wolfe prefers. But beneath that silence, people moved, shuffled, broke off, changed. Ethan Vale stepped down from Voss & Vale's board to pursue private consulting, as the PR release claimed. A small, agile firm registered in his name popped up in Geneva 2 days later. Its specialty? Neurological flavor mapping. Go figure. Lenora Voss reorganized the lab, closed 2 development wings, and shifted her work toward fragrance design. Less psychological liability. She did not return my calls, but Saul spotted her twice entering a discreet therapist's office uptown, once alone, once with Mira Kess. Owen Mitra disappeared. No social, no digital trail. A friend of Saul's said he took a research. Position in Lisbon, food chemistry again, but in a much quieter context. He left no forwarding address and declined all severance pay. That tells you something. As for Jasper Lively, he didn't reappear. But then again, that was never his style. What did surface, quietly, anonymously, and without fanfare, was a limited podcast. 7 episodes. No names, no photos. Just the voice of a narrator asking questions while subjects described flavors they couldn't name, and memories they hadn't known they'd lost. It was called Palate. The tagline, "Some truths can only be tasted." The first episode got a few hundred listeners, then 10,000. Then journalists started sniffing around. But there were no credits, no sponsors. Just confessions, recipes, and what you might call emotional archaeology. Wolfe listened to 1 episode, only 1. He was sitting in the office, beer at his elbow, orchids blooming like gossip behind him. I watched him as the voice on the recording, a woman middle-aged restrained, spoke through the speaker on his desk. It was something warm, almost citrusy at first. Then the aftertaste hit, a bitterness I couldn't name. And then I remembered the look on my brother's face the day he took the blame for something I did. I hadn't thought of it in 25 years, and I cried for the first time in just as long. Wolfe clicked the stop button. Silence reclaimed the room. "I've heard enough," he said. "Too real?" I asked. He gave me a withering glance. "Too inefficient. Pain does not scale well." But I could tell the truth. He wasn't just annoyed. He was unsettled. He picked up his book, The Physiology of Taste again, of course, and opened to a marked page. "Brillat Savarin," he said, was wrong. "Tell me, Archie," what did he say? "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you what you are." And bah, sentimental nonsense. He should have said, "Tell me what you avoid, and I will tell you what you fear." I leaned back in my chair. You think that's what Jasper was after? Fear? No, Wolfe said. Redemption. But through exposure. That is the flaw. And you didn't stop him. I never could, he said quietly. Not without becoming the thing I detest most, which is interference in the service of comfort. He set the book down, looked at me. Jasper Lively, he said, is not a villain, nor is he a victim. He is what most people cannot afford to be, a man who finished what he started. I didn't write that down. I just sat there, let it hang. Eventually, Fritz came in with lunch, squab in sage butter. Wolfe grunted his approval and reached for his knife. As he carved, he said almost absently, "There are crimes the law cannot name, and wounds no punishment can stitch. For such things, Archie, there is only appetite and the choice to taste or abstain." I raised my glass of water. "Here's to abstaining." He raised his beer. "Here's to restraint." We ate in silence. After that, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. For the rare peace that follows a storm you don't have to outrun.